Hello, my name is Tosca Bruno van Vijwijken and I direct the Transnational NGO Initiative here at the Maxwell School. Today we have Sophie Delaunay with us. She is the Executive Director of Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders, US, so the US part of the global movement of Médecins Sans Frontières. Thank you, Sophie, for visiting us today. It's been a brief visit, but it's been very useful. As I said during your talk, your brand name as MSF is enormous, but there might be a few people who don't know about Doctors Without Borders yet. So in short, what is the nature of MSF and what is the nature of your mission?
So MSF is a medical humanitarian organization dedicated to provide medical care and relief services to a population trapped in acute crisis. Our main areas of intervention are conflict, unstable situations, outbreaks, epidemics, and natural disasters.
Okay, interesting. And during your talk, you talked a little bit about how sometimes you also work with populations that are denied of health care, where it might be outside a conflict setting or outside a crisis setting, but where there is systematic denial of health care as well, right?
It's true. There are also some programs that we would run because we consider that there are populations that are particularly neglected, or also because they are suffering from disease that are particularly neglected. So it's a reason for us to assist this population and also to challenge the current status quo and try to have a better recognition about those health issues that kill millions in the world every year, and also to advocate for better medicine, more research for those neglected issues.
Right. So now, how did you personally, you are getting towards the end of your 5 years of leading MSF US, how did you first become interested in this type of work? You are a political scientist by training, you told me. What happened after your training?
Actually, it was during my training when I was doing my master's degree in political science in Korea. In order to pay for my studies, I was teaching at Alliance Française in Seoul.
Ah, right.
And I was teaching to young Korean diplomats. I was teaching French to them, and I used to show them the French TV news. We were in December 1992, and it was in the middle of the Somalia crisis. And that day I had chosen an extract from the news that showed, actually it was the U.S. intervention and the real suffering of the Somali population. And I was completely overwhelmed by it. And at the break, I talked to a colleague of mine, and I told him, actually, I should have done medical school, not political science, in order to work with Doctors Without Borders and engage in those crises. And he said to me, well, you don't need to be a doctor. They also need managers and administrators and so on. And he said, I know someone who's working there, so I can get you the address if you want. And so the day after, he gave me the address, and I wrote a handwriting letter from Seoul to Paris expressing my interest.
Right.
And they responded to me, handwriting, saying, when you're back to France, we're happy to interview you, which I did several months later. I graduated. I went to France. I contacted them. I went through an interview process, and this is how it started.
That's an amazing story. I would love to ask you a follow-up question, but I'll do that later on, about how the non-medical leaders and managers in MSF, how they relate to those who come from medicine, and given the culture of the organization, if there are any interesting comparisons then. But moving on with this interview, so what are currently some of the top challenges that MSF globally as a movement is battling with, and how is it dealing with those?
So, well, we're facing numerous challenges, as you imagine. One of the challenges is certainly we're victim of our success, I would say, and we've become a very large organization, which gives us the opportunity to increase our capacity, both from quality and quantitative care. So this is a good thing, but it comes with a lot of challenges in terms of managing the growth, the risk of bureaucratization of the organization, the need for professionalization and the tension it creates by being first and foremost a grassroots organization. So for us, a key concern is how to keep our identity, our field-driven mentality, and at the same time manage this very large movement. And the response for us is actually to keep the strong associative spirit, making sure that the field workers are still those who decide. So they are the members of the organization, and they elect our board of directors who choose their executive. So by maintaining this association, both spirit and status, we manage so far to prevent from to avoid becoming too much of a top-down organization. But it's definitely a challenge. Another big challenge that we face is the security. Not that there are more security incidents than in the past, but we have more exposure because we're bigger. And so it's clear that there are more and more territories that are off limits for us today because of the violence, because of the difficulty to be accepted by some transnational groups, for example. And so this is going to be a major challenge in the future year, which forces us to very critically review our modus operandi.
Very quickly review that.
Well, we constantly review it, but it's going to be, we have to be critical, and we have to find ways to access the population, to deliver aid, to be as accountable as we were, and providing direct aid, being the one to put the drug in the mouth of the patient has been for us really something that mattered, because it was an accountability issue, and also it's why we're there, because we want to help. We want to, we don't want to help remotely, you know. So keeping this contact with this patient is key to the spirit and the identity of the organization. But security issues are such today that we have to think differently about how we want to operate in those environments.
Interesting, yeah. So let's move then, for brevity's sake, to the question of how does MSF define effectiveness? You've already talked about some of the characteristics of the organization, but how do you know when you're effective? How do you assess that?
For us, the objective and the evaluation of our program is looking at mortality and morbidity.
Okay.
So before starting a program, we would actually do some analysis to understand what is exactly the health problem, and our goal will always be to reduce, if it's infant or maternal mortality, or if it's a specific morbidity related to a specific disease. And we do measure that. And the way we see how effective we are is by seeing that the health indicators, both inside the health structure but also more globally, is impacted by our intervention.
Okay.
Be it malnutrition or measles or malaria.
Right. Okay, last question. Given the nature and character of MSF, what have you found in your years of being the executive director of MSF US to be crucial to be an effective leader in MSF? What kind of skills do you think that students might find interesting to know about made you an effective leader, you think?
What has been the most useful to me has been to be able to relate to my field experience. Because when you are a leader of an organization, of course, you don't need to go into granular aspects and micromanagement. But if you want to explain the nature of the work And if you want to convey some of the principles and the beliefs that we have, being able to connect these beliefs with the practical reality of the field is the most efficient way to do so.
Yeah.
So what has been helpful to me as a leader was always to be able to relate to the crisis we're dealing with, and to provide the concrete reality of what we're facing.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for this brief interview.
Thank you.